We'll do about 15 minutes or up to 15 minutes of seated chair yoga, pretty simple shapes, so no previous yoga experience required. I invite you to find a seat, one perhaps that has a harder bottom if you haven't already. And as we come together, you might let yourself arrive, maybe noticing your breath. If you notice that you were holding your breath, like I just noticed I was holding my breath, one option might be to invite the breath back in. You might notice the pacing of your breath. Like, are your inhales and exhales similar in length, or are they different? And you might leave your breath as it is. You might continue to just breathe naturally. Another option might be to invite your breath to slow and deepen. So you might lengthen your inhale and exhale, maybe inviting them to get longer. So you might notice your breath, maybe noticing movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. And if you'd like, you might turn your head to one side. So you might turn your head to one side, maybe turning it part of the way, or you could turn it as far as you can. You have a choice. And if your head is turned to the side, you might make your way back to center and perhaps switching sides. So you might turn your head the other way. So you might have your head turned to one side, maybe turning it part of the way, or you might turn it as far as you can. You have a choice. If your head is turned to the side, you might bring it back to center and maybe tilting your head to one side. So you might be tilting your head to one side, so maybe your ear moves in the direction of your shoulder. And if you're tilting your head to one side, you might stay here. Another option might be to look to the opposite side with your eyes. So you might look out of the corner of your opposite eye and shift your gaze in that direction. Maybe looking upward towards the other side. Perhaps noticing the breath. And maybe bringing your head back to center. You're welcome to switch sides. So you might tilt your head the other way. So you might be tilting your head to one side. So maybe your ear is moving in the direction of your shoulder. And you might stay here. Another option might be to shift your gaze up in the opposite direction your head is moving. So you might have your head moving to the right, for example. Maybe your gaze is looking up to the left. You might be doing the other side. And perhaps bringing your head back to center if your head was tilted, and maybe rolling your shoulders. So you could roll your shoulders forward or you could roll them back. And you might choose to roll your shoulders like just so your shoulders are moving, or you could roll with your elbows moving out to the sides. You could roll with your whole arms. So you could rotate your whole arm. So you have a choice. If you've been moving your shoulders, you might bring them back to center and perhaps leaning back slightly. So you might lean back slightly in your chair. Maybe your back is away from the back side of the chair. So you might be leaning back slightly, maybe noticing your breath. You might notice sensation in your abdominals, or maybe somewhere else, or perhaps not at all. And if you're leaning back slightly, you might come back to center and maybe noticing your breath. You might place both of your feet on the floor, maybe lifting and spreading your toes. You might lower your toes down. And maybe reaching one arm up towards the sky. So you might lift one arm up towards the sky and maybe staying here. Another option might be to lean to the other side. So you might be leaning to one side, or you might be upright. If you're leaning to one side, you might place your bottom arm on the chair. And if you're leaning to the side, you might notice some sensation in the side of your body, or maybe in your shoulder. And if you're leaning to the side, you might lift back up to center and perhaps lowering your arm if it was lifted. And you're welcome to switch sides, so maybe reaching your other arm up overhead. So you might have one arm lifted, and you could stay here. Another option might be to lean to the side. So you might be leaning to one side, maybe noticing your breath. And if you're leaning to the side, you might make your way back up and perhaps releasing your arm. If you'd like, you might extend your left leg out in front of you. So you could extend your left leg out in front of you, maybe lifting your left heel off the floor. So you might have your left foot lifted off the floor. And it could be like an inch or two off the floor. You could have it a foot or two off the floor. You have a choice. Maybe noticing some sensation in the top of your left leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. If your leg is lifted, you might release it, perhaps setting it down on the floor next to your other leg. And you're welcome to switch sides. So you might extend your right leg out in front of you, maybe lifting your right heel off the floor. And you could lift it a couple inches or a foot or two. You have a choice. Maybe noticing your breath. And perhaps releasing. So you might have placed both feet on the floor and maybe crossing your right leg over your left. So you might cross your right leg over your left. So you might have your right ankle over your left thigh and perhaps opening your right knee to the right side. So you might have this figure 4 shape. And if you're in this figure 4 shape, you might notice some sensation in the outer hip of your right leg. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And perhaps releasing. You're welcome to switch sides, so you might cross your other leg over. So you might have your left leg crossed over your right thigh and maybe opening your left knee to the left side. Perhaps noticing some sensation in the outer hip of your left leg, or you might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. Perhaps noticing your breath. And maybe releasing. You're welcome to extend one leg out in front of you, maybe placing that heel on the floor. So you might extend one leg out in front of you, perhaps straightening your leg or moving it towards straight. And you might lengthen your spine to the sky, and you could stay here. Another option might be to hinge at your hips, maybe folding forward. So you might fold forward part of the way, perhaps placing your forearms or arms on your legs. Or you could fold so that your hands reach the floor. You have a choice. You're welcome to notice your breath. And if you're folded forward, you might lift back up. And if your leg is extended, you might bring it back. And perhaps switching sides. So you might extend your other leg out in front of you, maybe placing your heel on the floor. You could straighten your leg. And one option might be to lengthen your spine to the sky. You could stay here. Another option could be to hinge at your hips, maybe folding forward, perhaps placing your hands on the floor or on your legs. You have a choice. Maybe noticing sensation in the back of your leg. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. If you're folded forward, you might lift back up, and if your leg is extended, you might bring it back in. You're welcome to bend your knees, maybe placing both of your feet on the floor, and if you'd like, you might place your hands on your legs. Maybe as you're inhaling, you might move your belly and chest forward, perhaps lifting your chest and chin towards the sky. And maybe as you exhale, you might round your spine, perhaps lowering your chin to your chest. Maybe inhaling, you might move your belly and chest forward, perhaps lifting your chest and chin to the sky. And maybe as you're exhaling, you might round your spine, perhaps lowering your chin to your chest. And you're welcome to do that a couple more times on your own. Maybe noticing your breath. You're welcome to make your way back to center, and if you're facing back to center, you might lengthen your spine and perhaps turning your torso to the right. So you might be turning your torso to the right, maybe placing your right hand behind you on the ground or on your chair, or maybe placing your left hand on the outer edge of your right leg. And perhaps releasing. You're welcome to switch sides. So you might turn towards the left, maybe placing your right hand on the outer edge of your left leg, perhaps placing your left hand on the chair behind you. You might notice some sensation in your back, torso. Maybe releasing, you might come back to center, and maybe as you inhale, you might reach your arms to the sky, and perhaps as you exhale, you might fold forward. And one option might be to place your hands on the ground, or another option could be to place your forearms on your legs. You have a choice. You're welcome to notice your breath. And if you're floated forward, you might lift back up, and you're welcome to pause and rest with the breath. You might stay where you are, or you could lean back in your chair. And I'll quiet my voice for about 10 seconds as we rest. You're welcome to keep resting where you are. It's been my pleasure to guide your practice today. Peace. Thank you for joining me. You're welcome to continue resting, staying where you are. This recording of this will be available on my YouTube channel, which if you're on Clubhouse, you can find by going to my Instagram, and then my Instagram has a link tree. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you later.